Hello and welcome back. Thank you guys for being here. We are in the middle of our chapter on creating a login registration system using PHP, and we're using a very basic PHP procedural just to get some beginner stuff down. We'll be doing a little bit more advanced stuff later on, but I hope you guys are enjoying this so far. And if you just stumbled upon this video, just know that this isn't the first video in the series. We have a long list of videos, so go ahead and start at the beginning. And that way you won't be so lost of where we're at. All right, so without any further ado, let me switch over to my screen. And our goal for this video is to get our login form working and to at least get most of the, well, not most, we're going to get a lot of the login stuff done. We're not going to do the remember me cookie just yet, but we're going to do the rest of the login. So we're going to create the login page and do we'll go ahead and set up a session so that they are logged in. All right, so let's do this. Let's just make sure our servers are up and running. So for me, that's sudo op lamp xampp start. And there we go. So I'm going to clear that out. The next thing that we're going to do is we need to create a new page, so we can go ahead and close our verify.php file. We will go ahead and use our functions.php file, so go ahead and leave that open. And let's go ahead and create a new file here, and let's call this login.php. And at the top of the login.php, let's go ahead and open some PHP tags. And let's skip down a few lines here and close them. And then the first thing we're going to do up here in our PHP tags is let's include our head. So we'll just include head.php. And I'm going to skip down a few lines. This will be the end of the document, and we'll just go ahead and include our foot.php file there. So this will automatically include in, all of our boilerplate HTML that's in our head and foot earlier on, and we will also have our functions.php file included as well. And so let's go ahead and jump over and just go ahead and start with our HTML portion of this. So let's, down here, just here in the middle of the page, between our PHP tags, let's go ahead and start off with an H2 tag, and we'll just put login there. And then after the H2, let's go ahead and create a form, and the action will be, we can either leave this blank, or we can tell it that it's going to post to the login.php. Now that's the same file that we're on now, so it's just going to post back to itself. You can always post a form to a separate file if you want, and that's what that's for. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and tell this that this is going to be a method of post, like that, so that it posts the form instead of doing it with get variables. We don't want to do a get request, we are wanting to do a post request. All right, so that's our opening and closing form tags. Then what we're going to do is go ahead and start putting some fields in here. Now we don't need nearly as many fields as we had on our register form. We just need one for the email and one for the password, and then we're going to use a checkbox that we're going to make work our function later. So the first thing to do is go ahead and give this a div with a class of form group. Okay. And inside of there, let's go ahead and create a label, and the label will be for email. We're going to call our field email, and I'm just going to put capital email right here. And then we're going to put an input inside of here, and we'll do a type of text, or we can actually leave that off because that is the default value for that, but we'll just put it on there just to be complete. We'll give it a name of email. We also actually need to give this an ID of email as well because of our for right here in our label. We want to make sure that this label is referencing this input. And you do that with the ID. So the for and the ID match up there. The next thing that I want to do is let's go ahead and create a value here. Just so you remember in the last video when we had form validation errors, we didn't want to empty that out. So we're going to do the exact same thing here. So we're going to do some PHP echo tag here, and we're going to use our isSetElse function that we created. And what we're going to check for here is we're going to check our post array, which we haven't created yet. We'll do that in a second. And we're checking for the email key. And let me just kind of make this a little bit bigger here, because some people are saying that my font size is a little hard to read. I'm going to close that just to give me a little more space here. So there, we're going to have our email, and then by default, we're going to set that equal to an empty string. So we'll just do double quotes right here to put that to an empty string. And then we need to close our PHP tags. And then the last thing we're going to do is we'll do a placeholder, and we're going to make that placeholder equal to email. Then we can go ahead and close this tag out. Let me see here. Maybe my font's a little bit too big. I would like for that to fit all on the same page. That's okay though. So this will give us the email field. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and let's just check it out. Go to localhost in your browser / and then the name of your project for us is login, and then we're going to go to our file, which is login.php. All right, so now we have the beginnings of our login form, and you can see we do have inside of our field here, we do have an error, and this error is telling us that we have an undefined variable of post. So let's go ahead and fix that right now. What we can do to easily fix that is up here in our PHP tag, underneath our include, let's go ahead and create that post, and we're going to set that equal to an empty array for now. The next thing that we want to do is, just because we're going to need this in a second, is set up another variable called errors and set that also equal to an empty array. Now what we're going to do is this post is going to be created when the page first loads, before we do any sort of validation or anything with our posted error. So we won't have our posted material, but we won't have any sort of errors because now we have instantiated this. So our isSetElse will say it'll look in that post, and it's going to look for a value for email, which won't exist. So it's just going to be an empty string here, which is not a big deal. That's what we want. Okay, so now that we've done that, it's super simple. We can actually just copy this whole div right here, this form group. So highlight that, Control-C, and copy it. And then I'm going to go down a few lines and paste that here. And what I'd like to do is we're going to change all this to password. So we're going to call this for password, which means our ID here and our input needs to be password. And then also our name, we're just calling this password. And then we're also going to set the input type to password to hide the password so that people don't see them type it in. Then in our value, we need to change that to password for our key. And this will be the key inside of our associative array inside post. And then in our placeholder, we'll also type in password here. So let's save that now and see what we have if I refresh the page. Great, now we have our login form, and we have our email field, and we have our password. I did forget to change this label, so let's go ahead and take care of that. And right here inside the label, it still says email there. So we need to change that to password. So if I save that and refresh, now we have email and password. Okay, so I hope you're tracking. So far this is just mostly all HTML. We do have a little bit of PHP echo here that we're echoing our isSetElse function. The other little bit of PHP we need to add up here is we need to add our form errors. So we'll do that right underneath our H2. So go ahead and give yourself a little space there, and then just type in PHP display errors. And we're going to pass in this errors array right here that we set as our parameter there. So right now nothing's going to show up. So I'll go ahead and close that. Nothing's going to show up there because there are no errors in that array. So that's good. But Yeah. Let's see. As far as, let's see. We're not going to go ahead and add the checkbox just yet for the remember me thing. We'll just leave it like this. But we will go ahead and add our button to log in. So I'm going to give this a div with a class of button-wrapper, which we created before in our CSS file. And then we're going to go ahead and put a button in here. And we're going to give this a class equal to button primary. So we have two classes there. And then we will close that button tag. And inside of there, let's just type out log in. Okay. I'll go ahead and hit save and let's see what that looks like. Make sure we're on the right track here. Okay, so now we have our email, our password, and our login button. The other thing that we want to do is put some links down here so that they land on this login page, but they haven't registered yet, they can get to the register page. So let's go ahead and do that. So underneath this button wrapper, we're going to just use a paragraph tag here, and we're going to put don't have an account, question mark, and then we're going to put an anchor tag here with an href equal to register.php. So we'll go ahead and close that anchor tag. And we'll just put in register just like that. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. I'm going to save that, make sure I don't have any errors there in my PHP. So now we have this little don't have an account and then a link that they can click on to register a new account. So the next thing that we want to do is add one more link here. So we'll do the same thing and we'll say forgot your password, question mark, and we'll put a link as well here. So go ahead and put an href here, oops, equals, and then we can close this a tag down and we'll put reset password. And inside of our href here, let's go ahead and send them to a forgot password.php file. Now, we haven't created the forgot password PHP file yet. We'll do that in the future. So if you click on that link, right now you're going to get a 404 that doesn't exist. So I have this saved now. Let's go back and refresh. So now we have two links down here. If they don't have an account, they can click register. And then on the register page it says, hey, do you already have an account? Click log in. So now these two should go back and forth between one another. And if they click on reset password here, you will get it takes you to the forgot password page, but we haven't created that yet. So you'll get a 404. So I'm just gonna hit back and we're back here on our login page. So for now, I think this is all we're gonna do for the HTML on this login form. So let's work on making this work. All right, excuse me, I had to get a drink. And if I'm talking a little quieter, I don't mean to. I actually hurt myself a little bit doing some construction, or actually I don't know what I did. It could have been a sneeze or whatever, but I pulled some ribs out or something inside my armpit or chest area, and it just kind of makes me short of breath, and I don't have much strength to talk without it hurting much, or if I move around. So I apologize if I seem a little down, but that's all that's going on there. But let's enough of my BS talking. Let's go ahead and finish this up. What we're gonna do here is up here inside of our PHP tags, we want to know if they've posted to this. So let's go ahead and create an if statement here, and we're going to check $_post. And for now, what I'd like to do is if they've posted, let's just do a dump and die, and we'll dump and die the $_post super global. This is a super global variable that PHP sets up for us, and it's going to have all the information from the form in it when they post this. So let's go back now, and if I refresh, you're going to notice there's no dump and die. But if I type something in here, let's just say Parham Curtis at Melanator, and then we put in some sort of password here, and we hit log in. Now we're going to get this dump and die, which is a var dump here, and it gives us the email and the password back from our posted variable. Now remember, we don't want to trust anything that the user could be putting in this. So what we want to do is go ahead and use our functions that we created to clean that data. So let's go ahead now and put it inside this post that we set up. We're going to say post is equal to, and then we have our clean post function that we created in our functions.php file, and we'll just pass the $_post right into that. And now if we dump and die post instead, then we'll have cleaned up data in here. So I'm going to refresh. Ask me if I want to resubmit the form. I'll just go ahead and click yes. And it looks the same, but it would have run this through HTML entities, and as well it would have trimmed these because that's what our function does, and it does it for every element in that post array. Okay, so now that we know that we have a little bit of security going there, we want to start doing form validation. So I'm going to get rid of this dump and die, and I'm just going to put a comment here for form validation. And we'll skip down to the next line here. And the first thing that we want to check is, let's just make sure that they have sent us something back. So let's set up our required. I kind of like doing this. So we have an array, and we're just going to put each field in this array that's required. And so for us, it's just going to be email, and we'll give it a display name just to make it a little nicer to send back. And it's also going to be password. And we'll also send that just a capital password back. So basically it's going to check both of these inside of this post, and if it exists, or if it's empty, or I'm sorry, if it's empty, we're gonna put something into this errors array here that we can plug into the display errors form right here. All right, so now that we've done that, we're just going to go ahead and loop through those required ones. So we can say for each required as field, and then we'll just say, oops, field display. And what we want to check is, we want to say if empty, and then we're going to check post field. And what this is going to do is, the first iteration through this loop, it's going to check if the email will be assigned to this field value here, and if it's empty, it's going to we're going to be able to hit this if statement, and we're going to add something to this errors array. So what we'll do is we'll say errors, and we'll add on to it with this syntax here, and we'll do a string literal here, and we're going to say display is required. Okay. So now this will take care of our required fields here, and if it goes through, so let's go ahead and test that real quick. So if I go ahead, I'm not going to refresh, but I'll just hit enter to go back here, and we're just going to post this without any information in here. We should get 2 errors back, and we do. So now we see that email is required and password is required. Okay. The next thing that we want to do is we actually are going to want to check if the email, we want to try to get a user back, right? So let's go ahead and underneath this required field, so let's say they've passed the required fields, they've sent us something back. Now we need to look at our database and see if we have a user with that email address. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say if empty errors. So there's no errors inside of that errors array. That's an empty array. Then we're going to do an if statement here, and we're going to say, hey, let's create an SQL statement. And what we want to do is select star from our users table. And this time what we're going to do is say where email is equal to a question mark. Now this question mark, remember, to avoid SQL injection, we put this here, and we're actually going to bind this actual command will get prepared. It'll be a prepared statement, and we're going to bind the email from their email that they sent in to this. So let's go ahead now and do that. So what we can do is we're going to set up a result variable, and we're going to fire off our query function that we created before, and we will send in as the first parameter the SQL statement, and then our second parameter is the binds. In this case, it's just going to be an array, and all we're going to do is send in our email here. So we can just say post email like this. So now we have an array with just one element in it, and that is going to be our email field from the posted data coming back from the form. Okay, so now this result, it's going to run this query and it's going to store it in this result. Now we need to do one more thing to get that user, and so what we're going to do is create a variable called user, and we're going to set that equal to MySql underscore fetch associative array. Okay, so it's a fetch assoc, and then we just pass result into that. Now, if it finds a user in a database, it's going to be stored here, or this might be null. If this is null, it means that there is no user in our database with that email address. So let's go ahead and I just want to dump and die user for right now and just see what we get. I don't want to get too far ahead. So let's save that with the dump and die here. And actually, let's go ahead and open up a new tab in our browser, and we're going to open up localhost/php myadmin. And we'll go to our login database and click on users. Now, I do have a user in here from the last video, so make sure you do have a user. And what I'm going to do first is put in an email address for a user that we do not have. So for example, I'm going to put in Curtis at freeskills.com. Now, I can send a password as well, so it passes that first validation to check for required fields. And now when it dumps and dies, it is null because that user doesn't exist in my database. Now, if I go back and try one that does, so this parhamcurtis at mailinator.com, and hit login, you can see that it is dumping and dying back an associative array that has the ID, name. So if you look, this information is all going to match the information in our database. The ID, first name, last name, email, password, verification code, and all of that. So we have access to all of this stuff in the user. Okay, so now that we have the user, we're going to go back here. We don't need this dump and die. And what we're going to want to do here is we want to make sure if there's a user. So we're going to say if user, and we're going to have an if statement here. Okay, so inside of this if statement, the one thing that we want to do, well, there's a couple things. Number one, we want to know if they have been verified. So in the last video, we created that verify page, and we want to make sure that they can only log in if they verified their email address. So the first thing we can check on that is we can say, we'll do another if statement here, and we're going to say if user, and then we can check verified, and then we'll say if that does not equal to 1, then we'll do something here. So what we're going to do here is we're actually just going to redirect them. So we have our redirect function, and we're going to redirect them to the resend vericode.php file. Now we haven't created that yet either, I don't believe. No, we haven't. We'll do that in a future video. But we want, if they're not verified, we want to go ahead and redirect them. So let's go ahead and test that real quick. And I can test that by going in the database, and I'm just going to manually change that verified boolean here to a 0, which will be false. So this will be representative of a user who is registered for our site, but they have not yet verified their email address by clicking the link and verifying their email address. So let's go now and let's try to log that user in. So it should find the user, but it should redirect us to another page. Okay, and it did. So here, that user got redirected to resend varicode, and we haven't set this up yet, so it's a 404. So I'm gonna hit back, and let's go back to the database now and change that back to 1. So now this represents a user who has verified their email address. So let's test that now. It shouldn't really do anything. It should just kind of sit here because we haven't told it what to do. Okay, so it didn't redirect that time. So we know that our logic is working the way that we expect it to right here in this if statement. All right, the next thing that we want to do though is we want to make sure that the password that they sent in with the form matches the password of the user that they're trying to log in. So let's just go ahead and put a comment here for check password. I'm going to scroll up a little bit here. So here what we can do is I'm going to go ahead and set up a variable called matches, and we'll set that equal to, you know what, we need to set that up higher as well. Let's put that underneath here, underneath our user, create matches, and we're going to initially set this to false. So it's not going to match. So then what we're going to do is check if it matches here, and we're going to use a built-in PHP function called password_verify, and this takes 2 parameters. It takes the string that they typed in as the first one, so we know that that was in our post, our clean post array, and that was called password. So that's our first parameter in this password verify. The next parameter, so we need a comma and then a space, and then our next parameter is the hashed value from our database. So then that one was stored in the user array under password. So let me put the semicolon at the end here just so we won't have any broken code, and I'll show you what I mean. So the first parameter is going to be whatever they type into here, okay? And now of course we're going to run that. We don't want to trust them, so we're running that through the post array, and that gets put in right here. So we're getting that as the first value. The next one we're going to check is this hash. Now we stored this hashed password in the database under password. So this long crazy value right here is going to be the second parameter in that function. And what it's going to do is, we don't know how it does this, but what it's going to do is it's going to decrypt this, because this is an encrypted hash, and it's going to check if the password that they typed in matches that decryption. So let's go ahead and check that out. What we can do is, so matches is going to start off as false, and it's going to reset it with this password verify. So let's go ahead now and, oops, I keep screwing this up. Let's just dump and die our matches array right here. Oh, that's not an array, that's going to be a boolean. So it's either going to be false or true depending on what they type in here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to purposely mess up the password here and just put something in. And now you see that it said the var dump that in the dump and die function is telling us that this is a boolean and it's false. So that did not match. We would not want to log this user in. But let's try again, and let's type in the correct password and hit login. And now you can see that this is a boolean and it's set to true. So that means that we found a user in the database and their password matches the stored hash. So these people are good to go ahead and get logged in because they got the password correct. So what we want to do in that case, let's go ahead and do another if statement underneath this matches. So we're going to say if matches, then I'm just going to put in a comment here that says log in user, and we'll come back to that in just a moment. The next thing that we want to do is handle what if they didn't have this. We want to create an error message if they didn't have this. So underneath this if statement here, the if user, I'm going to get out of that, And what we'll do is we're going to say if not user, so if they didn't find a user in the database, okay, remember that's null, or if not matches. And what this, then we're going to do something here. And what this is going to check is, so this first check is going to say, hey, if there's no user or their matches is equal to false, then it's going to do something. And what we want to do here is add to our errors array, and we want to say something is wrong with your email or password. Now, the reason we're going to do this instead of telling them what's wrong is it's actually a little bit more secure to be vague here. Because if someone's just trying to figure out how to log into your system and they don't know what email addresses are used or what passwords are used, and they're just trying stuff either through brute force or whatever, we don't want to tell them that, hey, your password didn't match, but then they would assume, okay, I did find a user with that email address. So what we want to do is just kind of tell them very vaguely that something is wrong with either their email or their password. That way, from some sort of brute force attack or someone trying to log in who's doing something a little funky they shouldn't be doing, they don't know why it's not passing. We would know because we could actually do this, but I think this is a little bit safer to do this. So this is what we're going to do. For now, this is all the logic that we need. So what we can do is let's go ahead and screw up the password here. So I'm going to try a user that doesn't exist in our database, and we should get an error back here. Yep, and this says something is wrong with your email password. So now that's because the user didn't exist. Let's go ahead and put in the correct user, but a bad password, and we should also get the same error, and we do. And now if we put in the correct password and hit login, now we don't have any error messages. So all that's left for us to do is actually log the user in. So let's go back to our login.php page here. And there's two things that we want to do. So inside of this if matches, so we already know there's a user because we're in that if statement right here. So only if there is a user will it ever make it in here. And then we're checking their password if they have one. And if that matches, then we're going to log them in. So let's, right here, all we're going to do is create a login function. And for now, this login function is just going to take the user. And it's all red squigglies right now because we don't actually have that function yet. We're going to create that in a moment. But after we do that, then we're going to redirect them to the index.php, which will be at the home page, and we haven't created that yet either. So let's go ahead and hit save. Now, this file for now is pretty much done. We're going to do a little more work on this later with the remember me stuff. But for now, I think this is going to work. Now, all we have to do is write this login function to log the user in. So go back to the functions.php file here, and we are going to create a new function called login. And we'll do that down here at the bottom underneath this send varicode function. And so just create a function called login, and this is going to take a user. Now remember, it's taking a user because we're passing in the user here into the login function. So now the login, and I need to type out the word function ahead of that. So it's function, it's called login, and now we're passing in the user. Now if we save this and go back, we have no more red squiggly here. Because that function does exist and the editor knows that it exists. All right, so the login function for now is going to be super simple. What we're going to do is actually, before we write anything in this, let's scroll all the way to the top of this functions.php page, and underneath this opening here, let's just create a constant, and we do that with the define method here. And in all caps, I'm going to call this login_session. Okay? And then I'm going to do a comma. And the second one, we'll do a string. So just put some single quotes here. And then type in, something like 10, 12, 15 characters of just letters, random letters and numbers. Okay, so if I do something like this, and I'm just typing some stuff here, this is going to be the name of our login session for this application. Now, you could have done anything you want here. Don't do any special characters or anything like that. Just start it with, and in fact, start it with a letter. But have some letters and some numbers in here, kind of like this. And just do a random thing. We're going to call this our login session constant. And what we're going to do with that is we're actually going to use that for our login stuff. And so if you go inside of our function now, we're going to set up a session variable to let us know that the person is in fact logged in. And so it's super simple. In order to do this, PHP has a built-in session super global, just like they do the post. So it's $_session. And then as the key, we're going to pass in our constant here. So we're going to call that login_session. Now that's what we just created. And then we're going to say equals. And then what we want to do is we want to set that equal to the user ID. Now we will have the user, whoever signed in, will have the ID stored in the session under this. So that's all we have to do for our login function for now. Now we're going to make this login function a little bit more robust as we go. But for now, this will log the user in, and we can use that information in our application. So let's go ahead and see what happens now if I do this. So I'm going to go back here, and I've entered the correct information into this form. And let's right click on this and hit inspect. And what I want to show you is click on application, and then go ahead and click on cookies and localhost. Now we already have a PHP session ID in here. This is our PHP session. This is not a login. So I'm going to go ahead now and hit login. And this, it looks like it worked because it tried to redirect us to the index.php. So let's see now. One thing I'll do just to, let's go back to the login.php. Let's get rid of this redirect. We're going to have this, but I'm just going to comment that out for now. And then what I'd like to do is underneath this login, let's just dump and die our $_session. So actually we don't even need to comment out the redirect. By the way, to quickly comment and uncomment an entire line, and you can just hold, you put your cursor on anywhere on that line, and you hit Control and /, and then do it again to comment and uncomment that line. So that's how I'm doing that. It's just a keyboard shortcut. Okay, so now this is, after it runs that login function, it won't make it to this redirect, but it will do a dump and die on the session superglobal. So let's just go ahead now and let's go back to the login.php. And now we're here, and so let's go ahead and put in the correct information and hit login. And now you can see this is that weird constant we just set up, and it is set to, that's the key. So right now we're dumping and dying that session, and the key that's in there is 10. It's an integer and it's 10. And if we look at our database, then that means that this user with the ID of 10 is now stored in our session superglobal, and we can know now, if we look in that session, we'll know that this user is logged in, and we can grab that logged in user and do things with it, with that user. So now this user is logged in. We don't really need to do anything else. Now, I guess there's nothing really to show you here yet. I will show you that in a little bit. So we'll just use the dump and die to show you that sessions array here so that you can see this right here, this UFHKS, is this, if you go back to the functions.php, we just set up that define this constant, and it was called login session, and that is this key right here. And then the value of that array key is going to be the user ID. So it's the primary key for the user row that it found by the email address, and then logged them in with this, doing the password check function to check it against this hashed password that we stored. Okay, so just to recap, what we did in this video is we created the login form, and we did some basic validation up here. First, we cleaned the posted data because you don't ever want to trust the user input stuff. And then we checked for required fields. So in this case, the email and password were the required fields on this form. And then if there were still no errors, then what we did was we looked in the user's database for a user that had that email address that they typed into the email field. And we did that with a prepared statement using binds, and we bound our post email. So this is what was posted from the form, and we used MySql fetch associative array from this result to get the user. Then what we did is we checked to see if there was a user. Okay, good, it found a user in the database. Then we checked to see if they were verified. If they're not verified, we redirect them to the resend vericode.php file. And then if they're still made it and they didn't go through this, then they make it down to this check. And we finally check if their password matches. So we grab the posted password from the form, and we put that into the password verify function, and then we take the user's password that's in our database, and we check these two against one another. Now this password verify, it returns a boolean, so it'll return either true or false. And if it's false, it doesn't go inside this, it just goes down here, and we set an error up saying something's wrong with their email or password. If it's true, we log them in. So we created a login function inside of our functions.php, and then we're going to ultimately redirect them. For now, we just have this dump and die here. So we can go ahead and we can actually get rid of the dump and die. I just have that there to show you what that is. And then we'll take a look at that login function. So the login function, all it does for now is set a session up. So it basically adds to the session superglobal. The key is the constant that we created called login session. And then the value is going to be the user's ID, the primary key from the user's row. Okay, so then as we go through our application now, we can check to see if this exists. Oops. If this session with login session exists, that means the user is logged in, and we can then assume that the user's logged in and show them pages that only logged in users can see, things like that. We can do checks on that. If they're not logged in, we can force them to either register or log in. That's the only pages that they could see. So I'm going to be showing that in a future video. But we have a few other things still to do in this application. Like, what if they've forgotten their password? We need to go ahead and send them some sort of code or something so that they can reset their password. And then if they didn't verify, we need to send them to the email verification screen so that they can resend that email. We'll do that. And then what we want to be able to do is not have them log in every time they visit our site. So we can actually store what's called a cookie on their browser. And then if that cookie is on the browser, we can use that to log them in instead of making them type their username and password every time they come to our site. So that's still some stuff that we're going to be doing in the rest of this chapter. And then, of course, we're also going to log them out. All right, well, with that, I think we'll wrap up this video. I'm proud of you guys. Please go ahead and comment, like, and subscribe. Let me know if you had any big aha moments or if you have any questions. I will talk to you soon. Peace out.